We human beings are social animals. We inhabit dense webs of interaction. We are always exchanging goods, services, ideas, conversation, and information. We interact in outdoor restaurants and indoor bars. We meet friends on sidewalks to chat and to exchange romantic gifts. We give and get haircuts, and psychic advice, and hot dogs, and chicken on rice. Sometimes we sell drinks to animals. And occasionally we refuse to interact altogether, like that time Trump wouldn't debate Biden and they had competing town halls at the same time. The analysis of human interaction is a fundamental concern of economics. Why don't we live self-contained lives? And what is to be gained from exchange? Think about the many ways in which we specialize and then offer these specializations to the world. We might become dog walkers, or cobblers, or doctors, or barbers who also change watch batteries, or economics professors. How do we decide what to specialize in? In some cases, if you're naturally very talented at something, the decision is straightforward, like it might have been for Mohan Gurung, the famous Nepalese tattoo artist in my neighborhood. But what about the rest of us, who have no clinching talent? Maybe like these very humble tailors I chanced upon in Calcutta. In the words of the mathematician G.H. Hardy, I quote, "It is quite true that most people can do nothing well. If so, it matters very little what career they choose, and there is really nothing more to say about it." End quote. But even great mathematicians are sometimes wrong. Let's enter the classroom. My classroom is my son's whiteboard perched precariously on my desk, but it'll do. First, we need to simplify our picture of the world. Let's imagine that there are just two people on Earth, Aaliyah and Barry. And let's imagine that there are just two types of things in the world that could be produced or consumed: shirts and meals. So start with a situation where Aaliyah produces her own shirts and meals, and Barry produces his own shirts and meals. This describes a setting with self-contained lives. If Aaliyah is really good at making shirts and bad at making meals, and Barry is really good at making meals but bad at making shirts, then it's obvious that they could benefit from trade. Aaliyah would specialize as a tailor, and Barry would specialize as a chef, and they would exchange their goods with each other. But what if Aaliyah were better at everything? Let's say it takes her 1 hour to make a meal and 3 hours to make a shirt. So meals will take her 1 hour, shirts take her 3 hours. And let's imagine that Barry is much slower. Shirts take him 10 hours, and meals also take him 10 hours. So each meal takes him 10 hours to prepare. This is a situation where Aaliyah is better than Barry in the production of shirts and in the production of meals. Now, Barry approaches Aaliyah and asks her if she would like to trade her meals for his shirts. Aaliyah might say, "Why should I trade with you? I make my own shirts faster than you would make them for me." Here's how Barry might respond. "It's true that you are better at making shirts than I am, but making shirts is more costly for you than it is for me. Every time you make one shirt, you are giving up 3 meals. But every time I make one shirt, I'm giving up only 1 meal." Let's think about how trade might work for them. Aliyah makes one less shirt. So there's a -1 in her shirt box for now. But with that freed up time, she would get to make 3 extra meals. So she would have 3 extra meals. Now, let's suppose that Barry makes one more shirt. +1. Well, if he makes one more shirt, that takes him 10 hours. That's 10 hours away from meals, which means that he ends up making one less meal. Now let's imagine that Barry gives this shirt to Aliyah in exchange for 2 meals. Let that be the trade. So the shirt goes away from Barry and into Aliyah's box. So we are back to the same number of shirts that they were consuming before. In terms of meals, Aliyah gives 2 meals over to Barry. So it's +2, which adds up to +1. And she is left with 2 fewer, which adds up to +1. What do we have here? As a result of trade, they have just expanded the total amount they're consuming. They're still consuming the same number of shirts as before, but more meals than each of them had in the absence of trade. This is the magic of trade. This intuition is powerful because it is so straightforward, yet surprising. In this case, even though Aliyah had an absolute advantage in the production of both shirts and meals, Barry had a comparative advantage in shirts. That created the potential for mutual benefit through trade. These ideas can be traced back to the 18th century British economist David Ricardo, and they form the basis of our analysis of international trade. Just as 2 individuals can benefit from specialization and trade, so can 2 countries. This insight and our global willingness to act on this insight has fundamentally reshaped lives around the world. If you are craving Indian food in Lisbon, you can go to Popat store in Marty Moniz. If you are craving Pakistani food in Hong Kong, you can go to Chungking Mansions in Kowloon. In Barcelona, the oranges might be domestic, but the store owner is from Bangladesh. In New York City, the avocados are from Mexico. In the crowded markets of Old Delhi, you can buy imported snow spray and something that is called Pepsi, but definitely doesn't look like it. And in New York City, the manhole covers are from India. On a side note, when you start looking for manhole covers, you will be shocked at how many there are. I don't mean to blindly romanticize trade. In fact, trade raises all sorts of concerns that deserve to be scrutinized carefully. We might think about the fact that when countries open up to trade, consumers get cheaper goods, but some workers lose their jobs. Think about workers in the Kodak factory in Rochester or in the once bustling garment district of Manhattan, who find themselves now stranded when the production of cameras and fabrics shifts abroad. Governments must find ways to distribute the benefits of trade to those who lose out from it. This concern is not just limited to international trade. It survives to some extent in interstate, even intercity trade. We might think about the fact that comparative advantage doesn't emerge in a vacuum. It is the result of historical legacies, of whether people have the genuine freedom to invest in their skills, and whether certain industries can lobby government to inefficiently tilt the playing field in their favor. We might worry about human rights and labor conditions in countries other than our own. We might ask why we are more willing to accept the free movement of goods than of people. To conclude, anyone who insists on unregulated free trade without addressing such issues is taking the stylized models of economics too literally. And anyone who has a knee-jerk objection to trade is focusing on just a segment of domestic workers, forgetting that workers are consumers too. The fundamental wisdom of comparative advantage should be taken as a starting point. Then we should inject pieces of reality into this stylized picture to analyze new considerations. These are exercises in good economics that anyone can carry out.